Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Clayton with the PA Media Group, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first session of the Northeast Digital Marketing Bootcamp. Keeping busy professionals like you in mind, PA Media Group, Advanced Media New York, and Mass Live Media gathered digital marketing experts across the Northeast to bring you new ideas, tactics, and information to fuel fantastic marketing strategies. I wanted to give you a few housekeeping items before we begin the session. And first off, the session is being recorded. As an attendee, this recording will be sent to you after the event. If you have any questions at any time, be sure to click the comic book bubble, which is right above you here, and access the chat. We'll keep a list of as many questions as possible to answer at the end. And if we don't get to them all, don't worry, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the meeting. So now, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to our main attraction, Zoe Eckert with Mass Live Media, and John Pombo of PA Media Group to help you navigate the new cookieless future. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for signing in with us today during your lunch break. John and I are really excited to talk with you today about the cookieless world, and just to go over a brief agenda on what we're going to be going over today. My name is Zoe Eckert, as Mary introduced. Just to give a brief description of what I do, I'm the marketing coordinator with Mass Live Media and masslive.com, which is our local news site and digital marketing agency here in Massachusetts. So I do all of the marketing for both of those brands. And I'm excited to be presenting today with John, who I'll let introduce himself.
Thanks, Zoe. John Pombo, Director of Digital Strategy at the PA Media Group. My focus is on really creating and optimizing all of our class-leading digital marketing campaigns for our clients. I've been in the digital marketing space for over 12 years, working for large agencies in-house, but always with the focus of creating the best marketing campaigns possible.
Thanks, John. Just to go over briefly what we'll be talking about today, we're going to start off just to make sure that everyone's on the same page with what a cookie is, not the snack that hopefully some of you have during your lunch break here, but what the internet cookie is. And then we're going to look at that from two perspectives: how they help consumers and how they help advertisers and marketers like ourselves. And then what the conversation around privacy and cookies has been in the past and why that's leading into a cookieless future. And then we're going to spend the second half of our presentation going over what does that actually mean for you tangibly, what are the things we want to make sure that you know going into this change, and the ways you can adjust your marketing strategies to help you succeed in this sort of new landscape of digital marketing. So just as an introduction of why we can give this webinar, why John and I really feel it's important that we let you know about this information, and a little background on what each of our sites are part of. We're all part of a company called Advanced Publications. You might recognize a few of the brands that you have on your screen, like GQ or Gulf Digest. We're a part of a large company that really works in data. We work with first-party and third-party cookies, which we'll be talking really in depth about today. So we use a lot of this and as ways to help the businesses that we work with, and it's really our bread and butter and what we use. So we're very excited to share this information. We're really passionate about these topics. Now, before we talk about this big change that's happening in the digital media landscape, I want to take a second and maybe dispel some of the concerns that the title of the presentation maybe creates. Are you ready for a cookieless world? Well, I can guarantee that you're all ready for it, because the world that we all as people within our communities, but also as marketers and people in business, we've all had to face a new world in the past year. So I want to do a quick check-in to relieve some of those fears, because I know that all of you have had to adjust your marketing to reach your customers in a year where we couldn't physically reach our customers in the ways that we used to be able to. So I want to take a second and pause, and if anyone's got any ways that they, unique innovations and ways that they had to reach people in the past year, if you want to throw that in the chat. Mary can shout it out if anyone wants to share that, but I just wanted to give everyone, a second of relief in knowing that you've already had to make transitions, and this change with the cookies is going to be no different, and you really shouldn't worry about it. You should know that you can tackle it. So just take a brief pause.
Yeah, and just a reminder, in order to participate in our chat, just click the comic book bubble right above us and put it in. I see Stephanie here had mentioned that a lot of social media engagement is how she's interacted.
Yeah, that's a great way to reach your customers. It's, it's the internet equivalent of talking to people in your store. If you have a brick and mortar store, I know a lot of brands have had great success with using social media in the past year to make sure their customers stay up to date with information they need to know about your brand. Alrighty. Oh, sorry, Mary.
No, you're good.
If you want to keep throwing things in the chat, we'll shout them out at the end. And any questions, as Mary said in the beginning, throw those in the chat, and we'll make sure we come back to them in the end. But to start, what is a cookie? A cookie is it's a piece of HTTP data on your internet browser that keeps track of your visits and your activity on a specific browser page and website. There are first-party cookies and third-party cookies, so that's going to be important to keep in mind during this. First-party cookies are if you own a website and you put a cookie on your website, you're collecting data about your customers and your audience that's on your page. That's yours. That's first-party. Third party is if you were to use data that, say, Google has collected and target people with that would be using third party cookies. And we're very specifically going to be talking about a change that is around third party cookies, that information that you haven't yourself collected but would be using from an outside source. So let's think about cookies from the perspective of a consumer, you as a consumer. Why have they been important? Why have we been using them? Well, one of the main reasons is they allow for customers to have a personalized web experience as they visit certain websites. And it's also what has allowed the internet to operate on a mostly for free model. I think, a lot of people understand that the reason we have ads on web pages is because that's what allows a website to operate and have, monetary backing for what it's doing. If we didn't have this model, then we likely would have to, pay a subscription and a fee for every single site that we visit. And I know that there are some sites you already have to pay subscriptions for, but what you have to pay is so small compared to what you would have to pay if we had a model of internet that didn't use any data at all. So it's really, it's how the internet works, and it's how we make sure that people have a good web experience is using cookies to, in various ways, make sure that their experience is streamlined. And we can look at that from now cookies from the view of marketers and advertisers. Cookies allow advertisers and marketers to use behavioral and geographic targeting on their ads, which means that marketers can say your specific audience for your product is moms in their 30s who have more than one kid and carpool to soccer a lot. So you have something that is specifically going to help this audience. You can use behavioral targeting, which is derived from information from those cookies, to give your ads to that mom who would find it helpful to see and know about your product or your service. And as a marketer, you're then also able to use retargeting to have your ads continue across the web with that person so that they can keep seeing them and keep getting your information. And as part of that, say you're logged into your accounts on both your laptop and your tablet and your mobile phone, Cookies allow advertisers to be able to keep in touch with you across all of them, still knowing that it's you because you're logged into those devices, and allows that streamline of a personalized experience across your devices. So it's really important to understand that as advertisers, this information is really important because it allows us to target the right audience. It makes marketing much more pinpointed and a lot easier to get to the audience that we want to talk to specifically. So we're not talking to everybody and hoping that, you know, the few people that we want out of everybody are listening. I'm going to pass it to John for a little bit to kind of transition into the conversation of, well, we know what cookies are and how they're helpful, but what's some of the concern around privacy that we've come up with?
Yeah, and thanks, Zoe. And with that background on cookies, I mean, it leads us to this crux of the question, is this intersection of cookies and privacy. And as with anything in marketing, consumer preferences, behaviors, industry trends, they help to direct the shape of advertising and marketing as a whole. And that is no different with what we're seeing around the questions of privacy and how cookies are used. If we think about how cookies were first created by Lou Montulli in 1994 with Netscape, he created the cookie to really create the internet experience that we have today. Without the cookie, your shopping cart wouldn't remember what you added to the shopping cart. You wouldn't be able to check out. You wouldn't be able to, save your sign in. So, without it, it was, a key piece of creating a user experience of the internet that you know today. But as with any technology, it evolves over time. And as third-party cookies were created and used in the digital advertising ecosystem, became more common. But then in the last, 5, 6, 7+ years, there are certain events that have happened that have made consumers more sensitive towards how do they protect their privacy, how that data is being used and collected by third-party cookies. So one of the first kind of key events that really kind of brought this to top of mind was the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2016, with the use of data from your Facebook profile and other information and how that was used to help shape and influence political campaigns. Then in 2018, you had the European Union pass GDPR, and then following suit in the United States, you had the California Consumer Privacy Act in 2020. And with each of these different milestones, there was a growing awareness with us, with consumers, that data is being collected, it's being used for targeted advertising. And essentially, there was an increased perception that there should be transparency and control of that data that's being used, right? It's your data, it's your information, it's your search behavior, it's your browsing behavior. You should be able to control and how that's used. And as it's becomes a growing awareness within the consumer conscious, different companies will come up over time to provide solutions for that. And as early as 2008, DuckDuckGo saw this issue of privacy, and they came and answered the solution with a privacy-centric search engine as a reaction to Google Chrome as well as Bing. And they weren't just they were one of the first platforms to do that. But as with anything, other platforms want to get out ahead of the regulation that would be coming, as well as the growing voice from the consumer. Different age groups have different feelings, but across different age groups, there is a feeling that if data can be used, there should be some sort of tangential benefit towards it, as well as transparency. So if we go to the next slide, when we talk about platforms, one of the biggest platforms for collecting data, as well as one of the biggest, digital marketing partners out there, it's Google. And so when they make a change or they make any sort of announcement in terms of how data is collected or cookies are used, I think everyone stands up to attention, and it really shakes the entire ecosystem. So Google, they have 70% of the global desktop internet market share, right? So when they make a decision about how cookies are used in your browser, that impacts it. And as we go to the next slide, we'll see in 2019, they made that announcement that they are planning to phase out third-party cookies over a 2-year period starting in 2022. But in reality, they weren't the first. Firefox and Safari already had plans and were doing it. Why that didn't create as much of a large splash, didn't create all the New York Times or Wall Street Journal articles that you would have read, or your industry publications, is because, again, Google has 70% of the market share. And so when they make that announcement, every marketer and brand stands up and tries to understand why they're doing it, how they can plan for it, and what it means for their marketing approach. And as we go to the next slide, we can look at what are some of the takeaways with Google announcing the deprecation of third-party cookies in the browser. What does it mean for us as digital marketers and advertisers? I'll touch on some key takeaways. I think one of those is the value of first-party data being collected has become that much more valuable. So this is information of how consumers interact directly on your own brand site. That is becoming key. So having consumer information, whether that's through a login or a sign up, and personal information, and how do you engage with them on a one-to-one basis, either through email and other forms of communication, social media. That becomes so much more important because you're owning the data. You're not dependent on another source for that information. And you're understanding who your consumer really is, what that relationship means to your business and to your brand. The second takeaway is, in reality, Google owns most of that data, right? They will still retain their first party data. If you think about everything you do on a daily basis, the search you do on Google Maps, the search you do on a browser, the email you just opened up before this meeting in Gmail, Google still has all that information, and that's their first party data. So even though they're cutting off third party data for other marketers, and it's not much of a consequence to them to make this change because they still own a lot of that data, and that data can still be tapped in for marketing purposes. And the third takeaway that is related to this is the idea of marketing will be more people and one-to-one based. And that, again, goes back to that first party data. And, with any sort of large change comes opportunity for advertisers to reflect on the publishers and channel distribution partners they work with to ensure the brand message is delivering quality and effective delivery. And also making sure they're working with publishers that are beginning to collect first-party data that can be used effectively for marketing campaigns outside of third party. So I will turn over to Zoe to speak a little bit more about that.
Thanks, John. So given that we've all talked about cookies now, and given that we've discussed the decision that Google has made that has really impacted the way that everybody who works within digital marketing now has to approach cookies, what does this mean about how your digital marketing should evolve with this change? First, I just want to make sure we're clarifying why it's important. Everyone here has a brand that they're working on. And with that brand is a message about the solutions, services, products that you offer to specific audiences that would benefit from what you're able to offer. And as marketers, our jobs are to get that message out there in a variety of ways to the right audience so that we're using the budgets that we all have, which is a constraint that we all have, to the best of our ability to get the most out of our marketing budget. And with this change, Google is deciding that they're going to keep all of their data. They're not going to really be using or giving out that third-party data, having that be accessible to digital marketing partners that you would partner with to do a lot of marketing. So that means that you're not going to be as easily able to target specific audiences with your marketing. Which means you're going to have to find other ways to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about now, are the other ways that you can achieve getting that specific audience and type of people that you're looking to communicate your brand value to. The first and one of the most important things we want to point out is because third-party cookies are going to be a lot harder to get a hold of now, it is only increasing the value of first-party cookies. So let's talk about what those are and how you get access to those. You're going to get access to first-party cookies and first-party information through partnering with premium publishers. So let's take a second to talk about what a premium publisher is. That would be a platform that creates engaging and trusted content that's built its own audience, that is highly engaged, that trusts this brand a lot, that interacts with that content daily. So, outside of all the publications that we at Advanced Publications run, that would be things like CNN, New York Times, Bloomberg, or any local news sites that you have. One of the ways I like to think about this is sometimes, when you just are doing a quick Google search for something random during your day and you kind of click on any link, the first ones that come up, and it's on your phone and it's this website where there's so many ad positions and everything keeps moving as you're trying to scroll because other ads keep popping up and you've got ones that are across your screen that you have to exit out of. And you kind of have a really annoying experience with that site because it's not one that you go on every day. It's not, a trusted brand that you really love. It's just something you were trying to find, a quick piece of information on. Those aren't going to be premium publishers. Those aren't going to be brands that have specifically made their websites for the ease and functionality of their consumers. They haven't specifically made their websites so that you have the best brand experience that you can have on them. But sites that want to have a really engaged following and engaged and loyal user group are going to create content that's really important to that user group, are going to have a website experience that's really positive so that, really favorable brand feelings and expectations are made with that brand. So for you as a marketer, it's really important that you find those sites and work with them because the audience they have is going to give you what's called the brand halo effect. So when you're doing advertising and marketing on these premium publisher sites and you're partnering with this brand, you're choosing to partner with the type of brand that they are, the ads and the marketing that you do within their platforms are going to have a really high brand lift, meaning the favorable feelings that these consumers have with the brand you're working with are going to apply to your brand as well. The ads that I see on that quick mobile search with this brand I don't really know, I'm already annoyed at the site, so I'm kind of going to be really annoyed with the ads that I'm seeing on there. That's not favorable. The ads on that site, those advertisers don't want me to be annoyed with their brand because I'm annoyed with this other brand's website. But if I'm on an app that I use every day reading news that I trust, that I'm engaged with, that I'm having a good user experience on, the ads that I see, I'll already, without taking into context any of the marketing or messaging on the ad, I'm already going to be more likely to favor those advertisers. So as marketers, you want to make sure that you're looking for those opportunities, looking for those partners, each of us representing our markets here with Advance and, sorry, one of the only homes with a home phone left in America, I think. There we go. The only one home, so no one else could grab that. As I was saying, if you're looking for those opportunities to partner with those premium partners and work with their audiences, like the ones, we're all representing Advanced Publications, myself at Mass Live Media, John with PA Media Group, they're going to have an audience that you can use that data to reach them, and you can use that audience in your state, in your towns, in your county to really reach the people that you need to reach, which is going to be even more favorable now that it's going to be harder for you to use that Google data. They're going to have this really, really valuable first-party data for you to use and really valuable audience that you want to align your brand with. But I also want to take a moment and acknowledge the fact that each of you likely have your own first-party type data. The example I'm going to use on this one is it's highly likely that in some way you've collected the emails of your audience bases and your customer groups. And one of the digital marketing solutions we want to remind people of is that targeted email marketing is extremely effective if you're using it correctly. With your own data and with any of the data, first-party data from a partner that you use, you have the ability to segment your customer base and use sort of different marketing messaging, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But if you're able to segment that data, in this case, the emails that you already have, and identify that this is the group of people that maybe hasn't made a purchase yet, they signed up for a newsletter or something like that, or they've maybe made 1 or 2 purchases with you so far. So they're a new customer or not quite a customer with you yet. You're going to be, sending them emails and marketing messaging that's really emphasizing the value of your brand, because they're still in that stage of the awareness marketing where you need to teach them what your value is, as opposed to a customer maybe that you have that's made different purchases and you want to make sure they continue to, or they continue to increase the amount that they purchase from your brand and work with your brand. You're going to give them different marketing that's teaching them about new value that you provide, or additional value that you provide that they haven't yet taken advantage of with your brand. So just make sure you're thinking about the ways that you are collecting data from your customers and your audience, and how can you use that to personalize their experience with you, with your brand, and really get targeted messaging out to them. So our third and final piece of advice, and I think that this is probably the most important piece of advice we're going to be giving today, is you really need to take this moment in, how we're operating, how we're coming out of, the ways we had to switch our marketing during the pandemic, and how we now have to switch our marketing for a landscape that has less audience targeting abilities without these third-party cookies, is that you really need to make sure that your brand voice is differentiated. So I'm going to use the example of a local bank in your community. So say you're a local bank, so you are competing against the other local banks in your county and area, wherever you're operating, and you're also competing against the national banks. You want to make sure that as that bank, you understand first what differentiates your brand and your market. Now, I'm going to be honest, it's probably not your low rates, because that's probably the value messaging that every other competitor in your market is using. You all have low rates. That does not make you special in your market. What makes you special in your market might be that you focus really specifically on, the different segments in your community. For first-time home buyers, you make sure that you have all the options available to them to make sure that they can buy their first home. You have people that will work specifically with them, promotions and programs to help make that transition into their first home as easy as it can possibly be. Maybe you also work with your local businesses, and you really make sure that local businesses in your area understand the programs and options available to them to make sure that they're the most successful they can be financially. That's what makes you different and special in your market. And it also is taking a second to recognize that there are different audience groups and different audience segments that benefit from your brand in different ways. And you're going to have a very different message for each of those audience segments. So take this moment in time and really make sure that you're identifying what now currently specifically differentiates your brand, and make sure that your marketing is actually backing that up, and you're using a differentiated brand voice in all of your marketing. Create those segments, understand exactly what they need, and understand exactly how you match that need. And one of the examples I kind of wanted to bring up today, and it's not digital marketing, but per se it can be, but one of the ways we think that people forget as a way to differentiate your voice in the market is look up different sponsorship opportunities. Sponsorship opportunities really give your brand really high share of voice. So this can be something like sponsoring, a segment of content on one of your local news sites. It could be sponsoring, a local sports team, a local high school sports team. If those are the audiences that you're specifically trying to target, find that opportunity that gets you really directly in front of the audience you're trying to target. So it'll really align your brand with who you're trying to reach. And you're likely going to be the only or maybe one of 2 or 3 brands that are sponsoring and thus in front of that audience. So the share of voice you have in that is extremely high. And we think really valuable. There are lots of options like that in your market. I know each of us have options like that in our markets with our local news sites that are available to the companies that partner with us. So we just wanted to point that out kind of as an example of a way you can a way that doesn't use third-party cookies that you can find your targeted audience segment and really speak to them directly. Now, I know we've gone over a lot of different areas in terms of what cookies are, what the big change is, and how you might be able to reposition some of the marketing strategies that you have in order to make up for the audience targeting we're losing with losing third-party cookies. So we wanted to take a second and just make sure that we're answering any questions that you have. As Mary said, if you hit that speech bubble up at the top, we'll be able to see your questions in the chat, and we are more than happy to answer them.
And Zoe, while we're waiting for some questions in the chat, we did have the opportunity when everybody registered to submit some questions. So I figured I would give one to you and John first. And Sandy had asked us, will this impact your Google Analytics report?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think there's two issues at play with the cookieless future. So there's third-party cookies, and then there's the ability to consent to cookies when you go to a site. So right now it's not required, but you probably all have encountered it when you go to a site. At the bottom, it might say accept all cookies for tracking, or select what you would like to track. And so right now, Google Analytics it is a first-party cookie. And so by default, with Google's announcement on deprecating third-party cookies, that will not impact your Google Analytics tracking. What potentially will impact it in the future is if sites, and there's a larger movement to be able to select and opt out of being tracked by first-party cookies, such as Google Analytics on your site. So that's, with the California Consumer Act, any site operating in California has to be able to provide that consent at the bottom of a website. And if you opt out of advertising tracking, that information will not be pulled into Google Analytics. Just as recently as a week or 2 ago, the head of product management for Google Analytics talked about how they're going to address that in the future. And they'll use a combination of machine learning and probabilistic determination to kind of close the gap on those people who opt out. So they see about that they'll still retain first-party cookie information for 70 to 80% of users if there's a widespread adoption of the consent pop-ups on sites, and they'll be able to use that information to determine the remaining gap that does opt out. So it's interesting. They're really going back to that privacy questions. There's 2 diverging paths. I mean, there's the one about just consenting to any sort of data being collected and having you be able to select what information when you go to a site can be shared. I think related to that is also with the recent announcement of Facebook and with Apple with iOS 14.5. I think you've encountered it when you open an app in the new iOS. If that app is currently tracking any data, it will ask, do you want to continue to be tracked and sharing your data? Yes or no? And you opt in, right? So if you opt out, that information is not being collected by that app and by that provider anymore.
That's a very, very good point, John. With the iOS update, Is there anything specifically that affects as far as locations?
Yeah. So one, that's a great question, and one of the common features of any app on your phone that does tracking, that they will track, is your location. It is probably one of the most common features that is captured by any app on your phone, whether it's Facebook or whether it's the New York Times app or the Wall Street Journal app. Or so yeah, I mean, so if someone elects to opt out of that tracking, in terms of that being shared as a third-party source for other marketing purposes, yeah, that information would be lost as an identifier for you, for your location.
That's a very good point. And everybody, just a quick reminder to add any more questions on over in the chat. I think that one of the things that's important to remember in the cookieless future is that as smart marketers, as long as we continue to have our market differentiated messages and send them to our audiences, we will continue to do very well. And partnering with premium publishers and getting that first party cookie data is really essential to moving forward. All right, next question I have here is, does my advertisement use cookies daily? When do they refresh?
I think if we're talking about display advertising, which I think is likely what this question is talking about, if you're using targeting on your ads, if you're working with a site and you are targeting a specific location or a specific behavioral targeting or demographic targeting, then you are using the cookies that site uses to target those audiences, and you would be using updated information.
Oh, very good point. So how targeted would you suggest advertisers be when they're looking at hitting those specific audiences?
It can be a two-part answer to that. The value of being able to target an audience, we all know the value of being able to reach a specific person. But one thing we always want to make sure that people who are using advertising remember is that we can't always identify specific behaviors about every single person that is on a website and we're collecting data on. So take me for example. Maybe I'm looking for a new car, but I'm also looking for a new refrigerator. A site may have been able to identify that I'm looking for a new car, but they may not have been able to identify that I'm looking for a new refrigerator. So if an appliance store only targeted people who we knew for sure are looking for new appliances, they wouldn't reach me and they wouldn't get their message in front of me, even though I would have been looking for exactly what they offer. So sometimes it does really benefit you not to get too narrow on targeting, because you might be missing out on a lot of other audience. A lot of the times, if the campaigns that I'm working on are concerned around reaching specific people, I'll do half and half. We'll run the same ads and we'll run some of them towards a really specific targeted audience, and we'll run another segment of it on the full site so that they're reaching as many people as possible.
That's a very, very good point. And Zoe, I also had the question here about contextual advertising. How can we use contextual advertising beside the cookie to enhance our marketing plans?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what exactly your messaging is and what solutions you're using. But the more you can identify what your message is specifically, and then within that, what audience and content you want your message aligned with to reach the right people, you can use contextual advertising the same way you'd use behavioral advertising. And the same sort of advice would go towards that, is you want to make sure you're using it to reach the right people, but not let it limit what the scope of people you're reaching. So you're not pigeonholing your marketing message.
Oh, that's a very good one. And I see here that Jane has asked us, how do you build data assets on your own in your CRM to better target your customers with advertising?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I think probably the first way is to think about the different methods you have of collecting CRM information, whether that's your email sign-up forms, a contact form, requiring a sign-up on your site, and making sure you're pulling in relevant contact information then into your CRM, so that you understand who those consumers and customers are in your CRM. How you can activate that can be activated in different ways, whether obviously through email, but different technology platforms have the ability to onboard your CRM information to use. Since it is your first party, you can use that for targeting purposes. With Facebook, you can do that, to onboard your information into a custom audience onto Facebook. We have the ability from our premium publisher perspective to onboard CRM information and use that first party data to be able to reach people in your CRM on our different websites and our different premium publisher sites. But in terms of enriching that CRM information, and that just that's looking at the ability for what type of information you can collect on your audience and making sure you're enriching different aspects of those contact fields.
That's a very good point. And then I have one last question here, unless I see anything pop up in the chat. And I had a question on, how do we authenticate, attract, and ask people to give us their information in a way of being transparent as far as our marketing messaging?
That's
a big question.
I think it depends on, there are a lot of ways that you can collect information. It's just having that information pop up. If it's something that people are signing up for, and you've got, the check mark box of, you can use, sign me up for your additional email newsletters while I'm signing up for this promotion or something. You just want to have that information visibly available for people to know what they're signing up for. We've mentioned a few different times, like the pop-ups that come up that can come up at the bottom of a website. Just so you're aware, we are collecting cookies to enhance your consumer experience on our website. So having that information visibly available for people, I think, is the most transparent way of doing that.
That is a great way to transition people to understand a little bit more about how you're doing it. So really good point, and making sure that you put it in your message. Well, if there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I did want to take a moment just again to thank you for your time. We promised you a nice snack-sized session of information. Please, just some housekeeping. Look into your email for a follow-up survey and a way to download today's recording. And don't forget to check out anybootcamp.com to join us for any of our next 5 events. The next is going to take place on June 3rd at noon, and it's going to be about how to make your marketing campaign a winner using contesting to generate leads and engagement. So we hope that we will see you again really soon, and thank you for coming to our first session. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.